Hi everyone, you're with imno.Expert and I'm here with Gayantha.
Hi.
You may already know him. He's a well-known stylist in Colombo.
Hopefully.
Definitely. But here today to talk about Charlie Kirk. Interestingly, this is my second Charlie Kirk podcast, but I would love to hear about it from your point of view, Gayantha.
I think it's really interesting to see his legacy, right? And also, I think speaking for the queer community, there are mixed reviews at the moment.
Sure.
I think if you are open to the general social media channels,
Sure.
what happens is you see the excerpts, right, that different media pundits are sharing. My advice is to anyone wanting to have an opinion on this, see both sides of the story. A lot of the conversations I've had over the past few days, past few months are like, Charlie Kirk this, Charlie Kirk that. He has said some insane statements, if you really want to address it like that. But I think there's more to it. And I think there is, as someone who identifies as a part of the queer community, as well as someone who has strong links to their faith.
Sure.
I attend church.
Yes.
I belong to a really progressive church community,
Me too.
and I love that. And something that we've always been taught is to look at both sides of the coin. And I think there's more to this story with him as well. And whenever I'm hit with this information or conversations, even what I was thinking is like, okay, this seems a little out of the box. He was very vocal about certain things. I just wanted to highlight that there were so many things he was advocating for that there are a few things that I don't necessarily agree with, but there is some truth to what he's speaking about. And I think especially considering the context, he's speaking to the US audience. I think there's a lot more to his story that people need to understand before they comment on it. And that's the same case for me. What I was telling people as well. Yes, I've heard some of the things that he said about the queer community, or like how he wants to address certain things. He's just one man with an opinion. I'm more concerned with the people who are running with what he has said. And I don't want to be one of those people. And I encourage everyone to like get a grasp of what both sides of the media are saying and not be polarized by it as well. And it's extremely polarizing right now to have an opinion about him, right?
Yeah, and that's I'll take over from there.
Yeah.
Because so like I said, this is the second podcast that I'm doing on
Yeah.
Charlie Kirk, and it's interesting because I haven't been part of the movement. I
Right.
only started following him after he was killed.
Yeah.
But I have been eating, breathing, living with his sort of podcasts, with the videos, with the interviews, with all of that. And I think there's an important factor of what you're talking about in terms of the progression of the journey. And I don't want to talk about the sort of same things that I've already talked about with Kusum, but I find it interesting that the way he related with people, because so you have to understand, I've been watching a myriad of his videos in the space of 2 weeks maybe. And something that I've seen is the way he was relating with people has changed over the years. And we have to keep in mind that this is somebody who came into this sphere at a very early age, like late 20s maybe, or maybe even before that. And then you're dealing with students, first-year students of universities. I was talking about on the earlier one about how I felt as a student when you go in. So there's a lot of emotions running high. He was also portrayed as a certain type of person, even in terms of education. So there would be certain factors that he would want to prove at that point in time. But then as you move through this journey he's had, in the way he speaks about the different principles and values that he cares about. I know he focused a lot of his time and content on biblical values as well. But even the way he spoke about it, the tone in which he talked about it, the way in which he was accepting of somebody else's question or viewpoint, changed. And I thought that was really interesting, and that was a good takeaway for all of us, really.
I mean, a good debater has to see both sides of the story as well.
Yeah.
I've seen some interesting clips of him dealing, especially the time that he was speaking at Cambridge. There were things that he wouldn't back down from, and it's good to be someone of conviction at this point in the current sphere of everything. For me personally, I think he represents a lot of what America feels is the current movement or the current moment right now. But we'd be fools to say, hey, that's something that's happening over the fence over there, right? Considering Sri Lanka, the lines have been drawn as well, right? I don't personally view myself as a good reference point for the queer community here, but just from the perspective of someone who's like, the first time I heard about him, it was from a perspective of, hey, do you know this Christian guy who's going around saying all of these things?
Sure.
I was like, who is this Christian guy? I've never heard of him before.
Yeah.
I mean, the first clip I saw, I could noticeably say maybe last year, around the time that Trump was elected, it's been a while also.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second? Because I really find it interesting in the way somebody introduces us to new concepts or new people.
Yeah.
And it's just that introduction can sometimes frame the way you see them and look at them from that point of view. And this idea of, have you seen this Christian guy who's talking about these sort of things that are, and then it just frames it, right? And so then you're watching a myriad of videos of his, and you're not actually hearing what he's saying, because all that you will hear is the introduction, right?
For sure.
And I feel like we do that in a lot of things. I know I have been responsible for some of these things throughout.
We're just influencers. This is what happens.
and so I'm going back to this idea of progression.
Yeah.
There have been certain things, and I don't know if you could relate with this, but there have been certain things in the way I've looked at the sort of global narrative of things, about how I've looked at certain states, certain powerful states, even the United States, right? How I've looked at it and how I've talked about it at the sort of beginning of my career, and to the way I talk about it now. And it's almost like it's two different people talking about it, but my ideas on it and the understanding that I have has not changed. But I think what has changed is an understanding that if you tend to polarize, or if you tend to want to cut somebody off just because their views are different from yours, and say, oh, you know what, I'm not gonna be doing this anymore, and I don't want to be listening to this, and I want to be in my bubble. That there is definitely tendency that you are holding yourself back.
Oh, for sure.
In terms of your brain interpreting the world and what we call reality. But in general, also to be open to sort of dialogue. Right?
I think this is a brilliant way of looking at things as well. I was in a position where I was having a very polarized perspective come to me, right? And I mean, when they're introduced to me as someone who's Christian, which I identify as, the immediate reaction I have is like, whoa, let's find out if he is actually Christian. Let's find out if he's actually saying these things. I saw a clip and I was like, okay, you saw one clip, but let me find out a little bit more. And there are certain amazing things that he stands for. He wants to publicly stand for his faith, the things that he has said about families, protecting certain aspects of the family. I completely agree with and understand. And these are culturally accepted things. If you come from a conservative Christian background, like I do, I come from a very conservative Christian background.
That's amazing.
And this is normal. This is like your family values. Your family is put in a place where it's absolutely necessary. Your father leads, your mother follows, but it's a partnership. It's not servitude, right? If you are a true believer, that's how things need to be. I think there is a bit of convolution on how certain people view things. And, maybe in the 21st century, that's not exactly how we view women or even queer individuals, right? I mean, it's a conundrum altogether. A lot of people look at me and think, hey, how can you be Christian and still identify as a part of that community?
Yeah.
They don't even want to use the terminology.
Yeah,
And
because
here
it's
I'm in a place where that community is coming to me saying, hey, listen, he's a Christian. What do you want to say about that?
Yeah.
And my immediate reaction was like, okay, let me find out more,
Yeah.
right? And I'm so glad I did. I was like, okay, he said some crazy things.
Yeah.
That's how I would put it, right? But he stands for some interesting things that I can identify with from my faith perspective.
Yeah.
I think it's really important that everyone also views this and also understands the local environment here as well. We are a very we are a Christian community. The more overall Christian community is very conservative, and that's the kind of culture I grew up with anyway, right? And so from that perspective, what he's saying doesn't sound really strange. When you look at what he said about the community or the queer community, that's where I'm like, okay, I don't really agree on this, especially like his views on trans people. And that is my personal perspective. Now, I don't have a platform where I'm constantly trying to address these issues. So, but what I can say I do like to view myself as a trans ally. So I'm just like, hey, I think what he's saying is insane. I hope the people in the trans community know how to deal with him and address him in that perspective. But outside of that, I think what he stands for from a Christian perspective, I can't really fault. It comes down to how a church views doctrine, how a community wants to accept it.
Sure.
But and there is no way you can sit there and say he doesn't have an impact on how things are done here as well.
Right.
And I'd love to expand on that. A lot of people who saw me comment on these things also was like, hey, how does that have an effect on you, a stylist here in Sri Lanka? It's so subtle, right? I have clients who come to me and say, hey, listen, I want to dress like that person, dress like this person. The reference point all of a sudden can change when there is a political situation like that. It stops being about a black suit and suddenly a blue suit with a red tie. Red tie someone would reach for anyway, right? Now I'm making the connection saying, hey, listen, it's because the news cycle constantly has people dressed in a blue suit and a red tie, and now this guy is subliminally thinking about that. Even in Sri Lanka, shopping just tends to suddenly shift in this focus. People have a more conservative approach to how they would dress. It's not from a perspective of less revealing either. It's more, this is the kind of power dressing that I want to do, right? And that's the kind of conversation that I have with clients. I don't think it's a conscious effort that they're making, right? But that's how it trickles down here, right? But definitely conversations are now shifting. And I'm not so sure, for me, the thing is, yeah, sure, I see what he's saying, right? But I think that polarity of, okay, he's the enemy of the LGBTQ community, I don't think that's a decision that we need to run with. You should find out for yourself. If I just ran with the first few videos that a friend was showing me, that would have been my opinion as well.
Yeah.
Right? And, those polarities are not going to help anyone. Right?
Yeah. I think it's, you made some extremely important points. And even in terms of go see for yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like we need to repeat that to ourselves just before we go internet surfing in general.
Yeah.
But also you made, excuse me, you made a very interesting point about how a certain set of people identify you as part of the queer community and how people within that community look at you as also Christian, right? And I think that makes, you're pointing to a very important fact of how we are and how we ourselves might be categorizing ourselves in a certain way. And how then we sort of fall into different boundaries of the way people see us.
Yeah.
And I think in this Charlie Kirk argument, something that has happened in terms of religious institutions is also a fact of how people, because I mean, he's very transparent in the sense that he's talking about what he believes to be true biblical values, right? And so I've listened to some of that stuff, and I came into it like you also, from people saying, oh, that guy, and this is what he says, sort of thing. So you have that sort of lens on, where like, oh, where is this gonna go? And I'm a believer too. But I'm a believer, but I also at some points believe I'm very liberal.
Yeah.
And at some points I believe I'm very conservative,
Yeah.
right? I think as soon as we get rid of the labels,
Yeah.
I think it becomes easier to sort of process information. And so I'm watching some of the stuff that he's talking about. And I think it's quite beautiful. And I think it's also, I understand the heart of what he's talking about. I think also his ideas have sort of evolved over time. But one of the things that I thought was very important was this idea that he has, and he doesn't give voice to it directly, but it's his mantra of dialoguing with people who have absolutely different ideas to you, right? And so I thought that was like beautiful, and I don't know whether it was because I was searching for it, because now this is somebody who has passed away quite tragically, who has been killed. So I don't know whether it was me searching for it, but I found that that was a really important principle that needs to be inculcated, I think, in every area of our life, you know, whether it's a friendship or whether it's politics or marriages, or you need to keep talking, because two people in a marriage could come with completely and I
opposing views.
Yeah, and to the world it could look like, you know, if you tick all the boxes, and it could be like they're from the same religion, they're from the same background, there's all of those things could look a certain way, and you tick because we're always categorizing, but their worldviews and their values could be completely different, and it's important to always have the dialogue going, right? So I think one of the issues for me with the Charlie Kirk discourse was the fact that a lot of people, and I understand that different groups come into it with certain hurts, and hurts can turn into biases, biases can turn into bitterness, bitterness can turn into resentments, and then you just want to sort of block it off. I was joking saying that the church of Instagram preachers that, you know, cut toxic people and situations out completely and don't, you know, listen to it, talk about it, whatever. But I understand that it comes from that sort of place, but I think there is an important lesson that he was trying to teach, where he was trying to show, because he didn't need to talk with people who had different views. I mean, he could have just done, I think he would have got the same sort of following if he just talked to people with the same values as him, who would just agree with everything he said. I think there would still be a following for that. But he wanted to bring people to the table who would challenge him, who would talk about their views, because I think he felt that there was something that could be built, a bridge that could be built. We could see eye to eye. And I found that to be beautiful.
I mean, to interject, it wasn't even like seeing some of these conversations. There were some arguments that, or conversations or debates that he was part of, where the point that was being made was completely against the point that he was being made, that he was there to represent. And he was still willing to engage in that discourse. Right? And there are loads of people who walk away from interviews or conversations like that.
I think I would. I mean, really, I don't know.
He managed to keep things professional. He still managed to engage with them. I think that's admirable. Yes. And in the face of such scrutiny from the media and all of that, he still stood his ground from a Christian perspective. I admire that. I don't know whether I can be. And to have a really great understanding of how the community responds to him, I think he handled himself very professionally.
Right.
At the end of the day, Charlie Kirk is a figurehead of a movement in the US. And I think he progressively moved the peg of where they stood forward in a few steps. Now that has been superseded. But the point I'm trying to make here is that a lot of people don't understand. He was representing a viewpoint, and he did a really good job of representing it. Does he represent the entirety of what Christianity stands for and how the whole of Christianity stands on the queer issue? No, I don't think so. And I think we all have to give him that benefit of the doubt. And let's not forget, he has had some crazy arguments, especially, even the last debate that he was having, where he was answering a question, it was responding to gun violence, and he was very strong on, this is my approach, right? This is what I believe in. These are the facts that I know. You can't come with an emotional point across to that, right? I remember being a part of a lot of theological debate with the previous church that I belonged to. When to share my story, when I decided to come out, it was from a place of, I don't want to be living a lie anymore.
Right.
I'm sick of coming to church and pretending to be into someone's daughter, or having to maintain this lie. I want to be in a position where I'm just like my friends are talking about girls or whatever. I don't want to sit here and pretend that I want to engage in this conversation anymore, right? And it was getting too much. Like, I was good at maintaining maybe one lie. Now it was like a web of lies, because I said that point to this person and I have this, and I was terrible at keeping up that lie.
Yeah.
And I was just like, hey, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And so it was just talking to a few friends. And at that point, the only community I had, the only friendship, the only social circle I had was all from this very conservative Christian church.
Yeah.
Right? So obviously the first few people I'm telling are conservative Christians, right? Some way, somehow, a friend I confided in spoke to their parents about it. Their parents decided to come and talk to my parents about it. And my mother was like, hey, listen, you can't do that. You may be confused. I don't think you should talk to other people about this. I'm like, I've spent about 5-6 years thinking about this. Definitely not confused. I was in a position where I could, address this with my family. But the moment more than the closest circle found out, which is eventually going to be the case, within 6 or 7 months, there were people coming to me with Bible verses. I'm like, yo, I don't understand how my life is your debate, right? There are so many people. And you have to realize that for this community, from a point of where they are trying to figure out their identity, right? Now there are loads of people who have an opinion on it. How does that look? How does that feel, right? I think it's how Charlie Kirk was going about it. I feel like it was super wrong, right? Personal. This is my personal view. Yeah. There are loads of people still figuring out where they fall on the spectrum of things. And me, from some level, I was a nerd. I knew how to respond to certain things. But after dealing with 5-6 of this similar conversations a week, you're just like, what's the point? You just want to make a point? No. So I'm just going to agree with your Old Testament reference point so that, I can move on from this conversation. I completely thank you, brother and sister, for feeling the need to correct me. But I'm not in a place where I want to engage in more debate. That was not enough. Then it was leaders who needed to come and talk to me about this. And I'm like, hey, I came to church for very different reasons. I came to clear my head, find some peace of mind, and, maybe overcome my own personal struggle here. I wish there was a place like the church I went to right now, or I'm going to right now, where their immediate reaction was not, hey, how can we engage in philosophical debate about this with you from the Bible? It really needed to be approached in a different manner. That's my only concern here with Charlie Kirk or anyone who's following in his footsteps, even locally, because there's going to be. Yeah. I think, the church is built on this principle or this Bible verse of we've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, right? And I'm so glad that I belong to a community now where everyone, including the leaders, have seen inward and decided, hey, listen, I'm not in a position to judge anyone. Whoever is walking into our church or coming to talk to us, or anyone who is reaching out saying, hey, I need some advice or help. Our immediate reaction is not whether they fit into a certain subcategory of visually appealing things that a church should be known for. Right. We are meeting people in their need or wherever they are.
Can I interject? Yeah. Because I think you said some really important stuff, and I don't want to forget about it. But preconceived notions.
Oh my God.
Right? Yeah. I think those are so important no matter what side you think you're coming from, but you have preconceived notions, and then you come at it, and then you are unable to see the subtle changes, the subtleties, the difference of what is being said. I mean, look, I can understand that some of the stuff that he said, even if you're not just taking him per se, okay, we take like the discussion or the discourse of this sort of thematic issues. I think across the board, there's some stuff that can be said where you're just like, whoa, like, where is it coming from, right? But if you come with a lens of preconceived notions, okay, I'll give you the example. At his funeral, his widow spoke about forgiveness, right? And I thought it was quite powerful for her to even do that. And then I started reading the comments, and I was like, this is, you know, this
when the
is
wife
not
has decided, some people still want to stand on justice, right?
And so the comments, I mean, if you haven't read the comments, people read the comments, because that also, I think it causes a sort of internal reflection for ourselves when you read the comments. If you understand what makes you think, or what makes you think, what are they talking about? And so some of the comments talked about the fact that that it was sort of whitewashing, and this idea of the principles that he was pushing, that it's crazy, and now his wife is talking about it. And I was thinking, okay, let's dissect that. Okay, so forgiveness, it's a concept that we connect a lot with like the Judeo-Christian churches, right? But you look at humanitarian or war-related situations, it's called reconciliation. You look at community programs, post-conflict settings, we talk about restorative justice. And it's all about mutual agreement. It's about understanding rather than punitive justice. So this concept of forgiveness or this principle of forgiveness, it's really everywhere. And now science is coming out and saying that it's anatomically better for our bodies, you know? And even if you are a complete atheist, there's stuff out there that says let go of resentment because it's better for your mind, it's better for your body. So I mean, but if you come with preconceived notions, and I think he himself was coming to it with preconceived notions. And as you say, this idea of church is broken up into so many different historic concepts, contexts, different denominations. You know, it's so sort of fragmented. But if you're coming with a sort of idea that you don't want to hear about it because there is this concept of church connected to it at all, I think that's a really not progressive way of looking at anything. Like, let's leave aside Charlie Kirk, but it's not a good way to do life in general, right? So I thought it was really beautiful that you were also talking about in terms of living your truth, right? Brené Brown, she's talked about belonging, and she talks about this concept, which is why she says there are so many institutions that are growing in more power now, because we are all looking for belonging. But belonging needs to start from the self, self-reflection. And I thought that was beautiful in the way you explained it. But maybe my question is also, is it also a case, this idea of polarization and this idea of inability for us to be able to hear all sides, or why both sides are kind of pulling the world apart? Is it because of the way we are mobilizing ourselves?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
So see,
is it more political?
I think if you consider current affairs, right, on how we are fed media on a 15-second level, what we are open to and the kind of information we're fed, it's changed to a point where even the social media outlets are now saying, hey, take this with a grain of salt, right? And we are just bombarded with so many levels of contrasted information. You take the world of fashion that I rely on. Like being a stylist is a lot of research. I can't just go with the face value of one post that I see on Instagram or an article that gets delivered to my inbox. I have to now find different sources that give me that same information before I start talking on it
Right.
or working on it. Right? That is the world of fashion
Yeah.
and like lifestyle, like influencers, like whatever the products that they're pushing. I have to make sure that it's a great product before I start talking about it or using it myself. Right? And if that's the case when it comes to like fashion and lifestyle, how much more careful do we need to be about the decisions and the opinions that we are forming about the world we live in? Right? I have nieces. I have people I mentor. If I'm going to be speaking to them and giving them information or saying, hey, listen, this is how I view things, or hey, listen, this is how I want to build my business or move forward or make a direction like this. I want it to be informed. Why are we not treating the news that we hear or any current events the same way?
Yeah.
Right? For me, it takes on an extra layer. It's biblical for me to understand the full truth. Now, we live in a world where non-Christians are running with Bible verses, coming at me sometimes with Bible verses without fully understanding that it was a chapter. It was written for a specific community.
Yeah.
It was written in another language that we're still kind of like understanding better at this moment in time.
And that's another lesson, right? Like to take things out of context is so easy then to polarize.
No, but that's the default setting we live in.
Yeah.
And there are children growing up now. That's the only context they'll ever know. That 15-second video that hits them.
Yeah.
Right? And I think, we might be referred to as elder millennials, but I've just learned that I cannot just take that and run with it anymore. Never again. Right? So I make it a point to like figure things out, take some time to learn it and see if this is what it really means. Just because I hear something or someone tells me something, I don't immediately run with it. And that's a biblical principle for me. Yeah. Right? And so even like bringing it back to this whole Charlie Kirk thing, what I would advise anyone watching this, not just my community, yes, he's said some insane things about us. He has advocated for violence. Let's not forget that. Like, if you really want to view it, what he has asked for is like more accessibility and for anyone who wants to carry the right to carry arms to have it. But what he is not inadvertently addressing is what that results in for people who have no conscience, people who have like who might have issues in understanding their level of safety, right? As we saw with his demise in this case, right? Someone ran with it for sure. And I mean, we are now looking at a situation where a family who should be grieving and putting their husband/father to rest has become a national event, right? And the people who are there to prop themselves up in this process. I mean, watching that video was cringe for me. And I am like 10,000 miles away. I couldn't get myself to watch even the 15-second clips of it, right?
This is the funeral?
The funeral, okay. Right? I mean, there were so many national leaders who had shown up to speak their word, but it was just adding to their own national platform, right? And then the next thing was, I think when Charlie Kirk's wife had used sign language to say that she loves anyone who's like watching or responding, the more fundamental Christians were like, oh my God, she made a sign of horns, which is like completely alien to the sign language, the symbol for it. And now there's a whole group of people who are like, oh my God, this is the movement Charlie Kirk stands for, but his wife is like making these like hand gestures that do not really identify with this message, right? I don't know where I stand on it. I mean, you can run with that one screenshot of it, but if you really take the time to get to know who she is and how she's responding, even the way she was like, hey, listen, the right thing to do in this moment is I forgive you, right? I don't know how someone who has just found out that their husband has died even has the capacity to address that situation and choose the right thing to do. She's completely within her rights to say, hey, listen, I'm going to put this on the shelf. I have children to think of. I have my own emotional state to deal with, right? I think there's a lot that you need to address before you get to making that decision, right? Yeah. And a lot of people are like, I don't know whether that was the right decision to make, but she did it. And I think that's the Christian thing to do. Sure. Right. But culturally, we are supposed to take some time, figure this out, lean on God for the understanding on it as well. Right. And so I'll never make a decision without taking some time to figure it out. I wish everyone around us would do it, but the world is slowly coming into these snap decisions, these lefts and rights, right? And that, I don't think that's the Christian way of doing things. I hope, like, even for the queer community, that is the same. There are loads of people who have made statements, even locally, right, that are so derogatory. I'm just like, okay, give it a minute, right? This person does not speak, or this person cannot be speaking on this issue. So whatever this person says should not have an effect on it, right? And I think there are loads of amazing people who represent the community, who speak for these rights, who are engaging in discourse, who are in positions where they're fighting the good fight, right? And I think they're doing a wonderful job. Sometimes it's behind the scenes. It's never a news item or a news article. But they're also taking the time to figure things out and make strategic decisions. Right now, I think there is a huge global movement for more visibility and more acceptance of the LGBTQ community. But overall in Sri Lanka, I think we need to take a moment and understand the cultural context of things. We've been a very colonial influenced, like culturally conservative country, right? Culturally, we don't address issues. Like, forget the propaganda or the movement. Like, there are families who are not willing to address the issues in their own home because it's not dialogue that they're used to. I think there are loads of issues that we need to really sit and discuss. And whether we like it or not, we can't turn our head away from the issues that the queer community are facing here. But right now, I think acceptance is the most important, right? I'm all for the movement and what they're trying to establish, but I'm so glad for my community being there for me and accepting me for who I am. And, more than anything else, supporting my journey into my faith, right? I wish more places were open to that idea, but I know for a fact mine is.
Maybe I'll close with this, because I think what you're talking about is it's context driven, right? That there is a place that you found where your context is understood, and then that goes back to my point of is there a sort of concern in the way that we categorize and mobilize ourselves in recent years, maybe. And I think maybe I'll try to sort of make that point, and then you can close with any thoughts you have actually. But I think what's happened is we're moving away from an understanding of looking at situations or discussions or contexts. We're moving away from looking at contexts. And so then we are looking to belong, and then so we are categorizing and labeling ourselves liberals, conservatives, different subgroups.
Oh, for sure.
And we're mobilizing in this way, and the mobilization is becoming so political that actually I was joking with Kusum on the previous one, because we were talking about something and then we went into the Sri Lankan politics, and I said, "Oh, Kusum, you're being a politician right now, and I'll allow you to do it." Because actually, when I look at Sri Lankan politics and I look at the way the different parties and groups treat one another and the sort of drama that's created for their constituents, I respect it and I understand it, and I know that there is a need to do that. But there is a problem when we start mobilizing and organizing ourselves more politically, because then you and I are unable to sit down and actually have a conversation. And I don't want to understand your context and where you're coming from. I don't want to hear about it. I'm just like, no, Gayantha, because
but that's
that's
crazy.
that's not my point.
Yeah.
And then you will be like, well, I don't want to hear anything you have to
Yeah.
say either.
That's a fair
Because
reaction.
it's a fair reaction,
Yeah.
right? So we're just getting more polarized.
Yeah.
And so for me, I said this on the previous one, but I have to say it here as well. For me, the main takeaway from this whole thing, especially because I'm new to the
Yeah.
Charlie Kirk discourse as well, is this idea of dialogue. And I love the fact that you talked about, the sort of gaps in Sri Lankan society, because I have to say, I do love my country. I have been accused many times of being a nationalist. I don't see myself as that at all. But if somebody wants to give me that label, I'll take it.
Right.
But I do see the problems. But then when you pull out to the global stage, countries like ours are always sort of demonized, at that level. And then you are unable to talk about the context. You're unable to, at those forums, multilateral forums, to actually say, hey, I know we have problems, but let me explain where these problems came from. Let me tell you the history. Let me tell you when the first boats got here with colonizers. But nobody wants to hear that anymore because you're demonized, right?
Of course.
And so that's what happens at the macro. But I understand that it happens at the micro as well.
For sure.
And I think it's always important to hear different contexts.
Yeah.
Obviously, your context is very unusual and very unique, and also beautiful, because I think it bridges a lot of gaps.
Yeah.
It takes away sort of preconceived notions about certain groups as well. And I think it's beautiful. And I'd close with that. But
I'm happy to help.
you.
I mean, at the core of it, Charlie Kirk, if you want to, it's a very polarizing issue. The line has been clearly drawn, especially from his camp, right? This is who he is. This is who he was to us, right? And then they turn to the queer community and they're like, oh, what are you going to do about it? Why does he have to be standoffish? He was willing to meet people in any discourse and be like, listen, let's talk about this.
So it's the way, it's not even particularly Charlie Kirk the individual, but the use of him for different agendas.
Now that's what it's going to be, right? And that's how it's going to be represented. For me, I think he just like anyone else, just like there are loads of people in history who we see a very one-sided, whitewashed version, because there's no time to discuss the complications of their personalities or their backgrounds. Like take Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr.
Sorry, shameless plug-in. We do that on Perspective South. Please continue.
Tell us more.
Please continue.
So I think there are aspects of his personality and his personal views that people are just choosing to highlight or polarize just for a reaction.
Sure.
And
that could happen to either of us.
That could happen to either of us.
Right.
I think it's crazy to just run with that. And as a person who identifies as a part of the queer community and as a person of faith, I see it for what it is, right? He is a man with an opinion. And that is just one of the many opinions that exist out there, right? If we were living in America, this would be a very different conversation right now. I'm so thankful that I don't have to be living in fear of which bathroom I go to, right?
Sure.
Or just the simple acceptance of it. For a lot of people, the LGBTQ experience is very different now. They don't have the same viewpoint that the late 90s, early 2000s had. There was a lot of figuring out identities, right? Figuring out how you fit into society, that a lot of this generation, Gen Z onwards, it's never something that they would have to deal with. Maybe to a certain extent in Sri Lanka, in certain conservative circles or social circles, that would be the case. But the general understanding is, hey, there is a community like this that exists. They have their own personal views and people are willing to disagree about it. Before it was like, hey, why do you look different than us? Why do you sound different than us? Why do you have a different partner? Right? And there were social caricatures that came from our history or whatever that colored those viewpoints. Like take from my mom, for instance, the background that she comes from. She grew up in here, middle class. I don't know whether she knew people from the community, but they only knew certain caricatures of it, or certain historical figures, or how it was portrayed in the movies or the TV, or how people spoke about them derogatorily, right? So when her son decided to identify as a part of the community, her immediate reaction was not like, oh my God, he's this caricature. She was like, oh my God, he's going to hell, because that's the community she belonged to at that point. And it's so crazy, right? I think the queer community here has been through a lot, and now they're in a place where there is acceptance from friends, from certain social groups, right? At least, like, some of them are still figuring out how they want to be perceived more than how society perceives them. And I think that's a beautiful way of addressing it. And I think there are going to be loads of more Charlie Kirks. And even in Sri Lanka, I think there are going to be individuals who will take a platform, who will end up saying things that polarize certain people to the community. And I think we need to be ready for it.
Right.
Already, what he has said has polarized viewpoints, right? My viewpoint, personally, because I'm no expert,
Yeah.
shameless plug there, is, hey, he's from the same faith as me. We don't obviously go to the same church or whatever, but I see where he's coming from. I don't agree with everything he said, but I don't really condone his death either, right? It's a really sad moment, right? He would have engaged in his discourse and he would have been given the platform to talk about this further, right? But when it came to these issues, I think he was just looking for people to come and debate him and talk to him and say, hey, listen, this is my viewpoint. And he would have stood his ground and be like, hey, this is my viewpoint.
Yeah.
He wasn't really coming at this from another view. Like, whether he was inciting violence is a debate that needs to be had, right? But the truth of it is, he never came out saying, hey, listen, this needs to be addressed like this. Yeah. He was not saying, hey, listen, let's go run with a gun now, right?
Yeah.
That's the truth of it. And I think everyone needs to take a moment and say, hey, listen, take a moment and find out for yourself. Yeah. I think it's important. I personally adhere to the view that it needs to be a personal matter. For me, I looked at both sides of the coin and I'm like, he's not someone who affects me, but I understand what you're saying. I agree to some aspects of, his theology, but outside of that, I don't think there's a lot I agree with him.
Thank you,
that's
Gayantha.
what it is.
Thanks so much, Gayantha. So you heard it here. Context matters, acceptance matters, self-reflection matters, and not being polarized matters. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
My pleasure.